It's going to bring this up because when I was in the States, and I think this only applies to America or some other countries. So people are under the assumption of beliefs that because you're related, um, you must have the same traditions, upbringing, and so forth. That's not true. You see, within both sides of my family, we have completely different traditions, cultures, upbringings. So, and I'm not just talking about distant relatives. I'm talking about um, my dad's father. Oh, sorry, my dad's parents, his children. So my dad and his siblings. All the families have different upbringings. So my dad was married to my mum. Well, my dad married a Roman Catholic. Her children, myself and my twin sister, so we were brought up strict Roman Catholic. My cousins are a different religion. Their beliefs, their traditions, how they're raised is completely different. My dad's older sister, her children, their upbringing is completely different to my upbringing. Their traditions, their culture, their beliefs, everything is completely different. My mother's side, my mother's sister, Robin, her children, the way they're raised, their upbringing, their beliefs, completely different. We're different religions. So this is try to explain to people. It's like just because we're related, we don't have anything in common. Um, what relates to me and my upbringing doesn't relate to my cousins and their upbringing. It's completely different. Like for myself, I was raised under with the massive, huge influence of my grandparents, Regin Lola Purdy, and my nan, Lola's mother, Mary, and Mary's brother, Leo, and my mother and our religion's Roman Catholic, our traditions and so forth. My cousins, even on my mum's sister's children, didn't have that. And then, so how we're raised and the experience that we have is based on this group of family and how we are brought up. And I tried to explain this once to my dad's older sister, Sandra's children, Rebecca, and I'm like, Rebecca, your upbringing is completely different to mine. For starters, my mother was a paralegal, my dad was a builder. And then she used to get her back up straight away. And she goes, my dad was a builder. I'm like, yeah, but your dad was a drunk. Like Rebecca LeMay, my cousin, so um, dad's sister's daughter, her father, of course, I'm not blood related to, he married my auntie Sandra. And I'm like, Rebecca, your upbringing, like just because we're cousins, we don't have the same upbringing. We don't have the same beliefs. We don't have the same cultural experiences. We don't have the same traditions. We're not even the same religion. So you can't understand my life at all just because we're cousins. And this is the truth. So it's Rebecca Johnson, but she married, sorry, not Johnston, because it's funny. There's two Rebeccas. There's a Johnston and a Johnson. Rebecca Johnston, I went to school with at St. Aidan's in Rudy Hill. She married Alex Posey. Rebecca Johnson is my cousin, so her mother is Sandra Fleming, my auntie. And Rebecca Johnson married Darren LeMay and became LeMay. There we go. So to try and get this, because you see some families, they're very similar. It's like, oh, so you're similar to your cousins. That's odd. Because we don't have anything, like, we don't share any similarity to the upbringing of my cousins at all. Because each family is different. So it's like segregation within the own family. And I tell you what, I can actually say this when I can pinpoint a segregation aspect within my family when it goes to my grandparents, Reg and Lola. Because Amanda and I were always closest to my grandparents. So, and this is what Nan used to do. Lead up towards Christmas, we used to always move into our grandparents' place. We all did. So, all the my mum and her siblings, and we all spent. So, we'd move into my grandparents' house for Christmas. Week before Christmas, so we'd all be there. Now, Amanda and I got the bedrooms in the house. And my nan used to smirk. My nan hated my mum's sister's children. Absolutely hated Shane and Chrissy Childs with a passion. And I remember like so many times I've been in the kitchen, I've been helping Nan get ready for Christmas and so forth. And she's like, oh, they'll be here today. That's how she used to talk. She goes, okay, oh, they'll be here today. I'm like, oh, do they have to come, Nan? She goes, don't worry, I'm putting them in the shed. And she used to smirk about it. She had this real cheeky smirk, like she loved the fact that she goes, you'll be out in the shed, okay? I don't want any trouble while you're here. Like that. It was like that. I love the rest of. Yeah, she couldn't stand them. So there was segregation within my own family. Different upbringings. My cousins didn't have the same upbringing as me. They didn't have the same, they didn't have the same, I guess, social upbringing, the exposure, their parents weren't hard workers like mine. Both my parents worked 7 days a week, full-time jobs, basically. They were always working. So my dad's a builder, was always working. My mum was a paralegal, was always working. And on the weekend, she worked another job. So she's always working. There was always working. My cousin's parents didn't do that. Like, I'll refer back to my dad's sister, Sandra, and she didn't work. Sorry, I don't care what Rebecca said. She was like, oh, she looked after other people's children. I'm like, and? So what, was she a babysitter? And your dad was a drunk. You know, that's why you had the upbringing you had, Rebecca. And that's the thing, like, Rebecca, I'm not doing to be nasty. It's like, oh my God, can we just tell her, like, state the facts here? Because she said once, she goes, oh, you know, she's been known herself as being the down and out Aussie battler. I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go from this side of the family, seriously. And this is where I'm sure my cousin Joe and Healy, I can understand with where I'm coming from. Because I'm really polite and nice to people. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, here we go again with Rebecca. Oh, Aussie battler. I'm like, you're not a fucking Aussie battler. Your dad's a drunk. Your dad's a fucking deadbeat loser that you guys should be living in a fucking mansion with. Like, he's a builder. How much money he was making. But he's a deadbeat. Okay? And your mum didn't work. That's why. So don't start this shit with me. Like, you get to a point in your life, it's like, oh my God, do I still like you be visiting family members? It's like, oh God, here we go. Just bite that tongue. Oh yes, Beck, yes, Aussie battler. Oh, so hard done by. She said, oh yeah, well, we weren't lucky enough to be born with a silver spoon in our mouth. I'm like, oh God, here we go. Here we go. The same crap. Yes, yeah. And then she wants to project her shit. It's like, oh, don't say we had the same upbringings, Beck. I love you dearly, but we had completely different upbringings, completely different lifestyles. What I had growing up, you could only ever dream of. And that's nothing to do with entitlement. That's the fact that your parent or your dad's a deadbeat. You know, I can actually agree with my grandparents, Stanley and Ruby Fleming, why the divide in my dad's side happened, because your mum, my dad's sister, marrying your father. That's why the divide happened, because your dad's a lowlife. Barry Johnson and the Johnsons are deadbeats on that side. So I'm looking at it going, yeah, Stanley Fleming, my pop, was right. That's why my dad's side, that's why there's a divide in my dad's side. That's why there's dad. So there's three boys out of my grandparents and 3 girls, and there's been a divide for 40 odd years, over 45 years, and it's all to do with dad's older sister marrying Barry Johnson. I was like, yeah, seriously, you know. And then same with other family members on dad's side. It's like how they were raised. I'm like, look, we're cousins, but your upbringing, how you were raised, isn't how I was raised. We're not even the same religion. We have your traditions are only isolated to you, yourself, and your family, which means your parents and your siblings. My traditions are isolated to me and my upbringing and who I was raised under, my grandparents and my great-grandmother, her brother. So just because we're in the same family and we're first cousins, we have nothing in common at all. And people in America find this very hard to understand. It's like, yeah, but that's just the way of life in Australia. That's how separate and different people are. We can be related as first cousins and have nothing in common whatsoever, because our upbringings are completely different. In every single way, they are completely different. And I find that in this world, you find people that seem to be, well, I would say plebetarians, and their upbringings are all similar to their cousins. It's like, okay, but that's because you've all stayed in the same area. It's like you're a convict family that have been, or, you know, born and raised in that area. You've stayed in that area. You've never evolved. You've never gotten out of the poverty that you're in or whatever crap. You know, you haven't changed. People change. Just because you're related doesn't mean you have anything in common with your relatives at all. And I don't. Like our upbringing, like my upbringing is completely different to my cousin's upbringing. My mum's side, completely different to my cousin's upbringing on my dad's side. Completely. We don't even share the same religion. I have the same religion as my grandparents and my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents. My cousins don't, because their mother married someone different and had different lifestyles. That's the thing. And I find people find this really hard to fathom. It's like, how can you have this fathom? Here's a family. You have 2 parents, okay? They have their traditions. Okay, they raise their children. Those children go off and marry somebody else. That other person brings their traditions in that family. Whoever's got the most hierarchy, that's how their children's going to be raised. Like, I was raised very different to my cousins, extremely different, where you would be almost feel like you're from different countries. And that's how it is. Like, we love how Rebecca Johnson was like, "What was putting the silver spoon in your mouth?" And because they got attitude because Amanda and I had like a better lifestyle, and she puts it on us. "Oh, neither were you." I'm like, actually, Beck, we weren't raised the way you were. My thoroughbred hack was worth more than my BMW. That's a fact. So don't project your issues. Like, I love how people do this so often. It's even within families and society. It's like, those issues that you have are isolated to you yourself. That's you. That's your upbringing. That's your culture. That's your religion. Just because we're cousins and first cousins doesn't mean we share the same upbringing. I pretty much was brought up with what they call now as entitlement, which it's not entitlement. I just had a mother that had a good job from a young age. She worked for Ian Scholbeck since she was 16. That had a good income coming in. So I had good schooling, private schooling. I had good morals raised up. My dad was a hardworking builder. I had my grandfather who worked until the day he died, Reg Purdy. I had my grandmother, and my grandmother was a clerk before she gave up her job to raise her children. So I had influences of good people in my life. I had the influence of my great-grandmother, who was a seamstress, dressmaker. So this is the thing. You got to look at where you come from. It's like, well, my great-grandmother worked even when she was raising her children. My great-grandmother, Mary, never stopped working. She never stopped working. Even right through the Second World War, she was working. So my great-grandmother, who's a seamstress, dressmaker, didn't give up her job. Her husband was a jockey. Okay? So there's my great-grandparents, okay? Uncle Fred, Morse code operator on the boats, also a photographer. Her brother, there's my upbringing there with those people. We got Morse code operator, Uncle Fred, who was also an art photographer before the war broke out. He worked on the cruise liners. His sister was a seamstress, dressmaker, and her husband was a jockey. Then go to Lola, my grandmother. Lola was what you call like a bookkeeper clerk. Now, she worked right up until she fell pregnant. She gave up her job to raise her children because it was done in those days. She couldn't go back to full-time work. Her husband, Reg, was a butcher, but also did whatever other jobs he could do as well. So you got two trades, butcher and a clerk. Okay, so their morals were good. All right, those morals, even though they're no longer working those jobs, those morals came into me. Like, I used to go to work with Pop when he worked for John Smales, which was in Ford Street, just off Sunny Hot Road in Blacktown. Every time I was at Nan and Pop's in the holidays, I used to go to work with my grandfather. So he had business dealings with John Smales, who was an old family friend. It was family boats, although it used to be called PJ's boats. And I used to go to work every day with my pop, 5 full days and 1 half day. So I'm a teenager, a young teenager, because we're not talking about, I'm talking about when I'm younger, like even 12, 13, going to work with Pop 5 days a week, half day Saturday. So the morals were there. Okay. Mum, okay, she's a paralegal since she was 16, but also worked on the weekends. She used to do horse sales, salaries with Hamish Bay and so forth as well. So Mum always worked 7 days a week. Dad was a builder, always worked 7 days a week. So our upbringing was with our grandparents, not our parents, because they were always working. So there's my lifestyle. Then Roman Catholic upbringing. So started St. Aidan's in 1984, going to church on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Okay, morals. Something that my cousins don't have. So completely different lifestyle, different upbringing. 1984, I'm learning how to speak Latin as my school banner has Latin writing on it. The model of my school in St. Aidan's, Reddy Hill, my school badge has Latin on it. This is the thing, upbringing. Just because, so it doesn't have anything to do with, like I've often said, it has, people seem to think, in today's world, it's DNA, it's upbringing. I said, no, it's society. It's got nothing to do with being related. because I can look at my own family and say, but I have nothing in common with any cousins at all because our upbringing, how we were raised was completely different. Completely different. We don't have the same culture. We do not have the same beliefs. We think differently. I think differently to other first cousins because they have completely different worlds. Like, it's almost like living in a different country to me. How I was raised is not how they were raised. I mean, they could be raised ethnic for all I know. I don't even know their religion. I know mine. And I know my upbringing. We don't have the similarity to communicate. Like, we can catch up for coffee, but the way our life is, the way we think, we are completely opposite. We're always going to have difference of opinions because the way we're raised is completely different. And that's what it has to do with. Like, and that's where I found when I was in America, people didn't understand this. It's like, oh, because you're related in the same family, it's like we have different cultures. What I was raised eating growing up is not how my other cousin was raised eating growing up. Like, seriously, in the 80s, my mother learned how to make, was it fettuccine bosciola? Seriously, I remember Marianne Mihowski, my mum's sister, made it first. And she used to make it good, but my mother never did the potatoes great. Was it bosciola? One fettuccine, this creamy dish my mother used to always make, and the potatoes, she never did them right. It was bacon, potato, this creamy pasta dish. Apart from that, the other thing my mother could do right was she used to do a tomato and zucchini dish that I used to love. Every time she made it, I was like, oh, great. We'll be having steak, and knowing mum, she doesn't know how to cook steak unless it's a hammer to hammer nail in. It's so hard, it's like leather. So thank God she'll be making the tomato and zucchini dish to have on top of it. So at least that would soak into the steak. I remember thinking all the time, I was like, oh, God, oh no, can I just cook my steak myself? Because my grandfather cooks beautiful steak. My grandparents cook beautiful. My mum was, she couldn't drag herself away from the horses to cook properly. And then it was stuffed tomatoes. So my mum used to make really nice stuffed tomatoes growing up. Beautiful stuffed tomatoes. I've actually tried to recreate that dish. So that's one thing. She could stuff tomatoes really, really well. Growing up. And she did. She made beautiful stuffed tomatoes growing up. Stuffed tomatoes, tomato and zucchini, and fettuccine. Those were one. But my nan was the one that he would cook. My nan used to make schnitzel, and it was the best schnitzel. And that was my favourite. Like, even when I was living back in when I was like in my 20s, when I was living back with nan, she would make so much schnitzel for me. And she did. She made the best schnitzel. Nan always made good veal schnitzel. Yeah, and lots of it. And she'd always, like the way Nan used to crumb, she had these trays, she used to set them out in the, like the stove was near the entrance to where the lounge room was, and on the side there was a little corner area, and it was all flour and that everywhere. And the way she used to hammer the meat first, so there was nothing left of it, with the tenderizer. You could almost just get your fork and cut it with the fork. But schnitzel. So my nan made the best schnitzel, and then she made what she called was tomato and onion gravy. And basically that was exactly what it is. It's almost like making a Napolitana sauce. Because I remember saying once to Nan, I said, Nan, that's Napolitana sauce. She goes, it's rubbish. She goes, my nan used to make that. It's tomato and onion gravy. I'm like, okay, how do you make it? The same way that Napolitana sauce is made. Okay, we're going to call it tomato and onion gravy, Nan, for your sake. But it was tomato and onion gravy over schnitzel. And I used to always like lemon on my schnitzel, which is fun. And got even Joey Menor should be able to confirm that, because how many times are we coming home? It's like, oh God, no, I'm dying for Nan schnitzel. So things like this. So it's like, okay, that upbringing is different to another side. Like the other side of my family, I go to like Dad's mum. It's like, okay, Ruby Fleming. Dinner there was lunch, hot lunch, beautiful, hot lunch with homemade mayonnaise. So each family is different. Each cousin's life is different. Each upbringing is different. My mum's sister made better lasagna than I've had anywhere else in my life. Although I make better lasagna than Marianne. So Marianne Mihowski actually made really good lasagna. Although this year I just made really good lasagna. And, well, I've always made really good lasagna. That's how I do it. It's, my way. It's not too dry, not too moist. But, yeah, my particular way that I like to make it. But Marianne's, she always made really good lasagna. Like again, so her kids would be like, so her kids, Bradley, Luke, and Hayden Mihowski, they're my cousins, and they might go, well, the upbringing that we had is going to be different to my cousin Justin's. Exactly. They like what their mum, my auntie Mary Mihowski, cooked and what they ate and how they lived their life and so forth. And I'm sure as hell they weren't born and raised in Roman Catholic schooling where they went to school went to church 3 times a week during their childhood. No, they probably didn't. Although they're also baptized in a Polish church. So I'm baptized in the Roman Catholic Church. My cousins are baptized in the Polish church. So, and I find this really weird because people seem to look at a family and think, oh, you must all be the same because you're related. It's like, that's nuts. Because there's no similarities between any of us except we are related. The only similarity we all have is we're related. Apart from that, we're completely different. And that's just the way it is.